Everything that has a beginning has an end, and this history of the series is coming closer to its end as well. But sometimes the end may mean a new beginning, and all you have to do is wait. Make yourself comfortable, ladies and gents, because we still have one more complete story about a mysterious town of Silent Hill. As we remember, after Team Silent was closed, this franchise was going from one developer's team to another. The development was entrusted to Czech developers team called Vatra Games. Haven't heard about them? I'm not surprised actually, since I didn't know about them either. Silent Hill is only their second project. Before that, they only made a game called Russian Attack X Patriot, and most of you don't know this game. Again, I don't know why such a famous franchise had to be given to newbies. A bit silly and strange decision if you ask me. But Konami knows best, I guess. This way or another, the announcement of this part happened on E3 2010 with the subhead Downpour. The trailer didn't show anything genius or unique, and as many people noticed, didn't have the atmosphere of the previous parts. The following year, again on E3, another trailer was shown, and many people memorized it because of the song that was playing in the trailer, performed by Korn. It was a rather weird combination, new metal and Silent Hill. It was unknown what we would get in the end, a really bad game or just an average project. It was released in March 2012 and received extremely mixed reviews. Someone praised the game and someone wanted to wipe the floor with it. It's time to take a closer look at this game, shall we? It all starts with a new hero. Now his name is Murphy Pendleton, a prisoner who serves his time in jail. He is put into jail for a rather strange misbehavior. He stole a police officer's car. But the main idea of that deed was to enter the jail and retaliate against a certain Patrick Nephewer. And the story starts from this.
Why? You know exactly why.
The preambular part ends with it, and the player is moved a bit further in time. A prison guard, George Sewell, wakes our hero up and reminds him that today, Murphy will be moved to a high-security prison. And the person responsible for this process is Anna Marie Cunningham, who pays some special attention to the protagonist.
Get on the bus.
Prison bus hits the road, the night falls on the ground. It's going to rain soon. At one moment, the driver gets distracted by conversations of the prisoners and doesn't notice that the road ahead is broken. The bus crashes, slides down from the road, and falls down from the cliff. The hero regains consciousness on the shore of a lake and tries to get over current circumstances. But Officer Cunningham follows his steps and threats him with a gun, trying to get closer. In order to do that, she has to go through some narrow cliff ledge. Suddenly, the rock under her feet falls apart, and in a second, she's hanging over a precipice.
Shit!
A player has a choice either to help her or to let her fall. Well, she'll fall anyway, but this choice will influence protagonist's karma that will lead to different endings.
Shit!
And after that, our hero meets a postman, Howard Blackwood. He speaks with incomprehensible riddles and omissions, but still shares some valuable information with us. According to his words, all roads are closed and the only way to get out is some working funiculars. But first you have to find a ticket.
Good luck, Murphy. Hope you find whatever it is you're looking for.
Murphy sets out on a search for those tickets, and in one of the basements he meets another prisoner he saw in the bus. The convict will be hardly beating a woman. Of course our hero will try to stop him. But this way he'll only make things worse for everyone. Because this woman will turn out to be the first monster on their way. With only a swing of her hand she cuts the throat of our companion in misfortune. And after that Murphy will be left alone with this deadly creature. After that our hero leaves the basement to fresh air and finds the terminal that receives tickets for the funicular. And he'll be able to finally change his prison robe. Then by the cable car Murphy reaches the Devil Pit, a huge ravine where coal pits used to be situated. In present days this place is a tourist point and caves tours are guided there. We find this information from different brochures and a local worker, Josh Sater. Until recent times he's been a driver of a trolley that used to carry children inside the caves. But one day he came to work extremely drunk and a horrible accident happened because of this. 8 children died. John was fired and local citizens were ready to rip him apart with their bare hands. It couldn't go like this anymore, so this guilty alcoholic decided to commit suicide. And again, a player has a choice, either to console him or to taunt him. But the outcome is always the same.
Be seeing you around, Murphy. No!
No one will mourn him for too long. Without thinking twice, our hero boards the trolley and starts his cave tour. And at one point it becomes not so pleasant. But despite all those monsters, he still reaches his destination. He finally arrives at Silent Hill. But as it turns out, after dealing with one problem, he faces another. Suddenly Anna Cunningham shows up, and as we can see, she didn't die somehow. Murphy offers to unite in order to get out of that place, but Anna is adamant and wishes to arrest him at all costs.
I saw you.
Hands against the wall.
She goes through his pockets and finds a police badge, which definitely looks familiar to her. Cunningham asks him where he got that badge, but he really doesn't know, because he just took someone's clothes. Anna goes furious and barely stops herself from killing the man, but at the very last moment she simply couldn't pull the trigger. She calms down, sits on the ground and asks Murphy to leave her alone. And he follows her will this instant. It seems that everything has become better, but he needs to escape the town one way or another. Besides, this town is full of monsters. At this point, help came from where not expected. It seems like the local DJ speaks with Murphy through the radio and says that he knows how to escape Silent Hill. The protagonist again meets the postman and asks him how to get to the radio station. Of course, the postman shows the way that leads our hero to the tall tower with clock.
Oh sure, that'd be the tall building in the center of town. Big old monster of a clock at the top. Shouldn't be hard to find.
Murphy gets in the tower and tries to make his way right to the top floor of the building. On his way he sees a couple of flashbacks that reveal some of Murphy's secrets from the past. From these flashbacks we understand that he stole the police car not just by stupidity. He did it on purpose in order to get into prison and get even with Patrick Napier. In order to do that, our hero made a deal with George, who organized him a meeting with Patrick, and in exchange Murphy would have to do a special favor for him. Here the game introduces another character to us, Frank Coleridge, who creates an impression of a very kind and caring person. He doesn't understand why Pendleton got into jail and warns him to stay away from George.
Yeah, well, you just steer clear of Sewell and do your homework, right?
You got it, Chief.
But the whole meaning of those flashbacks we'll understand a little bit later. Let's talk about present. Murphy meets the DJ Bobby Ricks, and of course our hero asks Bobby how to get out of the town. But suddenly Rick says that he doesn't know anything and just announces the messages that he gets.
Look, man,
I came through hell and high water to get here because you called me. Now cut the bullshit, because I don't have time for this.
Chill out, man. If you don't keep your voice down, you're gonna get us both.
Bobby whispers to us that somebody's watching him and makes him read all those messages and repeat the audio tracks over and over again. He's sick of it and wants to escape the place on his boat, which is not far from there on the pier. But there is a problem. Bobby lost the keys somewhere, so we have to find them first. At this moment, Cunningham enters the room.
Don't mean they're willing to listen. See for yourself.
Again, she desires to arrest Murphy, but she's not destined to do this. A crowd of monsters surrounds the place. After the scuffle, our protagonist regains consciousness at the same place, but with no Anna or Bobby around. So Murphy decides to leave the place on his own. But it turns out not so trivial, since the whole building is now in the other world. His wandering finishes with sliding somewhere down, and at the moment where he was supposed to fall, he grabbed a minute hand of a huge clock. Not for long though, his hands slip and he falls down like a stone. And of course he doesn't die from that fall. Pendleton simply wakes up on a bench not far from that building and meets the postman from before, who came out of nowhere. He says that he has a letter for Murphy from St. Maria's Monastery, which is not far from there. The hero doesn't react happily. He's already sick and tired of all these quests, questions and paranormal crap. He's not going to any monastery, he just wants to leave the town. But the postman chills out our protagonist and says that it doesn't matter what he wants. He will have to go there, one way or another.
It doesn't matter what you want. As for me,
there is no getting around, and Murphy enters that half-ruined building and meets the nun, who says that they have a body in the morgue. And as she knows, Murphy is the only relative. She suggests to look around at first and go down as soon as we're ready.
I'm sure you'll find your visit enlightening.
In a monastery, Murphy finds a boy who is sitting behind a closed door. And that boy is not going to open the door because he's sure that Murphy will turn into a monster again, the boogeyman. In order to prove him wrong, he asks the protagonist to read a poem that wades off the boogeyman.
Kid, look at me. I'm not a monster.
Not yet.
Now we have another task. To find parts of this poem in the monastery, and along his way will be shown why Murphy decided to get into prison. He had a family, Carol, his wife, and his son Charlie. One day the boy didn't come back home from school, and Murphy decided to look for him, but unfortunately his son was found dead in the lake not so far. But it wasn't an accident. The police found evidence that this crime had been committed by Patrick Napier. Patrick was arrested, of course, but still it didn't make Murphy feel better. His son is dead and his wife left him. Because of that bastard, his whole life went downhill. That's why he decided to take revenge on him at all costs. After recollecting all this and finding all parts of the poem, we'll return back to the boy, who has some resemblance with his dead son. And at that moment, the boogeyman will appear behind the boy's back. Our hero tries to do something to save the child, even reads the poem that's supposed to chase the monster away, but it doesn't seem to work.
Though you have regret, you can't just forget. You alone decide.
At last, the
your
player
fate.
will be able to enter the room and come to the boy. At that moment, he'll be seen by a little girl, and she'll decide that Murphy is responsible for all that. The girl runs away and Murphy tries to chase her, but she'll manage to escape.
Wait!
After wandering in the supernatural world for some time, he'll finally visit the morgue he was invited to, with the nun waiting for him. Somebody's corpse will be lying next to her under the sheet. Murphy tries to explain to her that there must be a mistake, that he buried his son several years ago. But it's not Charlie under the sheet, but the boogeyman. The whole situation is going out of control. until Henry finds the keys from the boat he was talking with Bobby about. The protagonist tries to take them, but Boogeyman won't let him and throw him into a wall.
Glory be to God.
After that, the hero is brought to the shore where his son was killed, and there he gives the final fight to the Boogeyman. After that, the action is brought back to the church, with Patrick Nephew's body lying in front of Murphy. And it's not a glitch, I'll describe to you why that happened. Murphy suddenly realizes that revenge will not bring his son back, so everything he's done has been for nothing. All he has to do now is to find the boat and leave this place. And it seems like that's it. Freedom is near. He starts the boat and tries to leave the town. But not so fast. It turns out that Cunningham has been there all the time on the boat and waiting for him. She still tries to arrest Murphy like it's something personal, and it actually is, but we'll find out about her motives a bit later. Murphy is tired of all that chasing and games and tells her to shoot him right there if she wants to, and she does.
Fine.
But you didn't think that Murphy would die so easily, did you? Of course not. He wakes up in a prison cell with a certain monster sitting in front of him. When the monster goes away, the cell opens and releases the hero. After a rather long time, you will have to wander in this prison, and by finding pieces of information, find out what deal he made with George. In exchange for Patrick's life, he asks to deal with one more person in the prison. During the upcoming riot, he would have had to sneak into a bathroom and kill a person in it. That was the deal.
I'll take care of it.
After that, a player will have to explore the prison in all kinds of ways, solve a couple of puzzles, and in the end face a boss, a huge deformed human body sitting in a wheelchair. Through simple manipulations, Murphy deals with it, and here comes the most interesting part. Cunningham appears again with a gun. She asks him why did he kill the man. Of course, Murphy doesn't understand what she's talking about, because it's a monster, not a man. But reality gives another surprise. Instead of the dead body of a monster, we see the body of Frank Coleridge. And again we are thrown back to the past. When Murphy came to the bathroom, he saw Frank there, and George wanted Murphy to kill that exact person. Frank, the only person who believed in Murphy and saw him as a person who had got into jail by accident. At that moment, George also entered the room and said that Frank had to die because couldn't keep his mouth shut. Besides that phrase, the game does not explain any other motives of George, but still we can understand that George is not the most decent police officer. And here our protagonist had to decide whether to kill Frank or not. But the choice doesn't look standard as we could see a couple of times before.
Do it, you son of a bitch! No.
Then a player is again thrown back to present time, and the game tells us about Anna's motives. It turns out that Frank was her father, despite another last name. The badge that she found in Murphy's pocket in the beginning of the game had belonged to her father. He was an honest and decent person, and Murphy killed him. And he didn't die fast. He spent years in a vegetative state, in a wheelchair. Yeah, that monster we saw through the game was Frank. We also could see several wheelchairs through the game. After he died, Anna tried really hard to transfer Murphy where she worked, and she managed to do that. She wanted to deal with him personally, because every time she looked at his face, she saw a monster. And after these words, the camera changes to Murphy, but now he looks exactly like the Boogeyman. It's rational to describe this twist, I think. Our protagonist wanted to kill Nephew because he had killed Murphy's son. And Patrick was a monster for him. He's the Boogeyman. Cunningham wants to deal with Murphy, who killed her dad. And for her, Murphy's the monster. For her, he's the Boogeyman. When we met the girl in the church, she ran away from us because this girl was a young Anna, and she saw Pendleton as the Boogeyman. And again, where our hero deals with his own Boogeyman, the corpse of Napier changes to the corpse of Murphy, a man to some people and the monster to other people. And so that's the whole deal. Now the game gives us an interesting surprise and gives us a chance to become the monster ourselves. The boogeyman has to kill Anna, who certainly doesn't want that, but the outcome is pretty predictable. When she falls down, a player will have to make the last choice in the game, whether to kill her or not. And here comes the finale and different endings. Downpour has 5 endings and 1 bonus ending I'll discuss separately. They would differ depending on 2 things. The first one is the karma. Yes, those 2 choices in the beginning were the key moments. Of course, the killing of enemies could also decrease your karma, but if you wanted to help both people in the game, even killing of monsters could barely spoil your karma. The second thing is the final choice, whether to kill Officer Cunningham or not. If you let her live with good karma, at the moment when you are thrown back in time, we find out that Murphy refused to kill Frank and paid for it. George had to deal with everything on his own and put the blame on Murphy for all that.
Your end of the deal, Murph. Cop killers don't last too long in here.
I'm sorry, Frank.
In the next scene, we'll find Murphy and Anna on the shore of a lake. Having realized that Pendleton is innocent, she forgives him and lets him escape.
Pendleton's dead. Over.
Roger that. You gonna be okay?
You better go.
If you let her live with a bad karma, everything goes a little bit differently. Yes, Murphy refused to kill Frank. Yes, Anna forgives him and lets him go. But she doesn't forgive the real killer. She loads her gun and decides to meet George. But unfortunately, we won't know the outcome of this deadly meeting.
So?
We need to talk.
Now let's find out what happens if you decide to kill the officer. When we are thrown back in time, we find out that Murphy still stabbed Frank several times, and after that, he would wake up in a prison cell. Just like before, a monster in the wheelchair would be staring at him. Murphy looked like a nice guy through the game, but still committed a crime in the end. He didn't understand a thing, and now has to go through this nightmare again.
Wait, stop! This is all wrong, please!
To get the last from the main endings, a player had to have a bad karma and kill Anna. From those actions, we can understand that Murphy is actually a bad person, and a death injection is waiting for him.
Any last words?
Yeah. I'll see you in hell. Cupcake.
But there's also a secret ending, not bonus one, don't be confused. During the final battle, a player had to take all the damage from Anna and do nothing. When the boogeyman dies, we can see a video. It repeats the beginning where Murphy was transferred to another prison, but this time there is Cunningham instead of Murphy. And Pendleton himself plays the role of a prison guard. He wanted to avenge his son, and his wish has led him to the prison. Anna wanted to avenge her dad, and she also ended up in the prison. One revenge breeds another revenge.
Prisoner secure. Open 302B, transfer.
In many ways, Downpour came back to its roots, rejecting the mechanics of shattered memories. It's again a survival horror with an opportunity to kick monsters' asses, or whatever else they have. But this time players had a lot of limitations. The inventory was not unlimited anymore, so the players had to carry around only 1 melee weapon and 1 firearm. Or 2 firearms, but at the moment you are out of ammo, you'll have to beat your enemies with the butt of a rifle. And even if you chose the first variant, it's not that perfect as it looks. When a player grabs a gun, he, for some reason, throws away a melee weapon he was holding, even if it's some kind of extremely powerful weapon. Considering melee weapons, it has a strong resemblance with Silent Hill Origins. You could grab a lot of stuff and use it as a weapon, starting from different stones, chairs, and ending with axes, hammers, and pitchforks. Besides, those items could break after a long usage, and if such a thing happened to you, you could use your bare fists. Also, with the help of some weapons, you could break a lock, for example, destroy boards and sticks, or pull the ladder with a boat hook. We could already see the similar system in Homecoming, if you remember. And in this game, we can finally observe a relatively open world. In Homecoming and Memories, all locations were linear, and in Downpour, developers allowed players to investigate the streets of Silent Hill. The town itself has changed as well. Well, it's completely different, to be specific. In the first game, we could get familiar with the northern part of Silent Hill, in the second game, the south part, and now, welcome to the unknown eastern part of Silent Hill, the place where former coal mines were situated. It turns out that Silent Hill is not a small town as we thought, it's a whole agglomeration of small settlements. Besides this open world, puzzles have come back as well. Maybe not so difficult as they used to be, but it's not bad in my opinion. Still, there were moments where players had to put some extra thought in order to solve this or that puzzle. In order to solve some puzzles, players had to use one unique element, ultraviolet flashlight. In previous games, players always carried some kind of a flashlight, but Murphy is a different case. He feels okay even with a lighter, but the perfect solution is still a flashlight with two modes, regular and UV mode. And don't be afraid that it will take place in your inventory, you can always hang it on your belt. Of course, there is another familiar feature of the series, it's the transformation of the world around. And here the process is slightly different. If a player is inside a building, we'll see metal constructions, paint and walls destruction and all that familiar stuff. But here, besides that, the whole geometry of the stage changes, something like that we could see in Silent Hill 2. Here we can find upside-down rooms, eternal staircases, different slides, and similar things. All in all, this supernatural world consists of 90% of traps and only 10% of monsters. Besides, there are stages where players have to run from a supermassive black hole that chases Murphy and sucks in everything it touches. And it is similar to monsters from Shattered Memories. You have to run away, drop different objects behind to slow the hole down, and escape it before you're out of life. That's how the supernatural world looks inside buildings, and it's different from the way it looks on the outside. Since Murphy's son was found in water, water itself is an important element of the game, and it's a symbol of transformation of the real world into the supernatural one. If the weather is fine outside, then everything's okay, but the stronger the rain starts to pour, the faster you should find some cover, because during the downpour, there are a lot of enemies outside, and they attack Murphy with great pleasure. And that's why the subhead of this game is Downpour. And this time there are no original monsters, unfortunately, with double meaning or something like that. The design is also not that great in comparison with previous parts. For example, screamers with blades instead of their fingers. Dirty, beaten up, but still looking like women without great deformations. There is a chance though that this enemy represents Pendleton's wife who left him, but there are just speculations and theories. The second common enemies are prisoner minions, which may represent the rage of the prisoners, but also they're just ordinary men with some metal constructions on their heads. As well as Juggernaut. At least he's way bigger than our protagonist, and he's sort of the authority in the prison. He might represent the desire of Murphy to control people around him, or at least control the situation. But there are still a couple of interesting creatures in this game. For example, weeping bats with long hands and legs. They are pretty fast and strong. Also, they can move on the ceiling and like to attack Murphy from there. There are different speculations about this monster, that it may represent Murphy as a creature who feels better in the darkness and moves fast, so he won't be noticed. Also, I'd like to point out the dolls or mannequins who seem to just stand somewhere innocently, but they have a ghost attached to them that harms our hero. The problem is there is no way to see them without ultraviolet light. There are two ways to solve the problem, either to kill the ghost or kill the mannequin. Well, basically that's it. I could also mention wall corpses. They spit something disgusting from their stomachs, but still they can't move and can be related to traps, I think. Bosses share the same problem. I mean, there are barely any bosses at all. The first one is the boogeyman, just a big dude with a hammer and in rubber clothes. The second boss is the body of Frank in the wheelchair. Of course, it can use some telekinesis to damage you or hit you with his arm, but in general you only have to pull out all tubes from life support machine in order to kill him. And that's it. There are all bosses you'll have to encounter. Even the Void can hardly be added to this short list. But actually, there is one more creature that could become a rather powerful enemy. This is a huge stretched human face with a monocle. We could see that face on the level with a trolley ride, but it does nothing, only says one single phrase. But if you dig a little bit deeper, we can see that in one of the old trailers of the game, this face was shown at least like an enemy or even a boss, but for some reason it turned into a simple decoration. Besides, the protagonist looked a little bit different. He was blonde. But I've still completely ignored the fact that this game possesses a rather big innovation: side quests. As we remember, the game has open world, so Murphy could visit some lanes and alleys which were not connected to the main plot, and after solving a puzzle, find some supplies or reveal some stories from the past of the city and its citizens. There were 13 of them, and one could be opened after the first complete walkthrough. I'll try to describe them all shortly. First of all, Murphy can find cages with birds and release them. After every released bird, a moment from Murphy's memories will be shown. Here's the whole memory. Nothing special, but still. The second quest could end up with more valuable reward. There are several patrol cars who want to catch us, and if Murphy gets caught by one, it's hard to get rid of the trouble. Because instead of police officers, a bunch of monsters will get out. In order to stop all this mess, a player had to sneak into the police station and call back all police cars. But players had to find out their call signs first. From perspective of a story, the quest with ribbons is interesting. It concerns a search of a missing girl called Ariadne Johnson, who suffers from autism. Since the girl cannot orient in the town freely, her mother left ribbons to lead her home from school. Those ribbons were tied to different places or could be found on the ground. But in the end of the way, Murphy finds only a key and a piece of cloth. The girl simply drowned. But that key led to the apartment where she lived and a letter written by her mother. In this note she wrote that she couldn't take it anymore. It was extremely hard to take care of such a child, and she wanted everything to end. That's why she did what she did. She became free and decided to leave that place forever. It's very possible that the mother intentionally changed the ribbons in order to make her daughter go the wrong way. During some plot events, Murphy finds a note where he finds out that a lot of people lost their stuff, and it's possible that somebody stole them. This thief lived in one of the apartments, and we could find his body hanging. It's possible that he couldn't take it anymore and decided to end all this, but Murphy could find all missing stuff in the room. All he has to do is to return these things back to their owners. As a reward, Murphy gets a new outfit. Another quest is the quest with a mirror. The reflection was different from reality. A player had to find those differences and make changes in the real room. But one had to move fast because otherwise a monster would show up, and this monster could only be seen in the reflection, which made it really hard to kill him. After completing the quest, we are able to find a note from the asylum that says that the patient sees some people in the mirror. This may be the reference to Silent Hill Origins, where Travis's mother said the same words. In another quest, we can find somebody's ash that should be scattered in a special place. No, not the special place from Silent Hill 2. Also, a picture of a bench could be found there. After finding the necessary spot, a player had to scatter the ashes and find a combination of numbers that is the combination for the safe in the house. The next quest starts when a player finds a table for poker. There are cards lying on it with a combination called Dead Man's Hand. The dead man himself can be found in the next room. Someone held his arm into a vice and tore his heart out, and that's exactly what we should return to the dead man. In order to do that, Murphy goes down to the basement and finds a maze there. At first he has to find the heart and return back without dying, because after finding the heart, dozens of monsters start to appear. It turns out that Silent Hill also had a bank, and there was a quest connected to it. A player could try to open the lockbox, but the alarm started to work. In order to open the boxes and escape this place, Murphy had to stand against 5 waves of monsters and kill them all. As long as Silent Hill is not a big city, it's not quite obvious why there was a subway, but it still existed. At one of the stations, Murphy can find a homeless man who is basking near the warmth of a burning barrel. He'll offer a deal. If Murphy brings something to eat, he'll show him a fast way to travel the city. Actually, he'll just open the door that will let you travel to other stations. But not all of them at once. You'll have to bring a code and a fishing rod to open them all. In the end, after completing this quest, if we return back to the homeless person, we'll find him dead. I mean, it's possible that he's just sleeping, but I seriously doubt that. Don't worry, there are not that many quests left. In the following quest, we have to find paintings that are spread over the town and return them back to the gallery. If you make the right order and light them up with your UV flashlight, you'll see a map with a marked place of a treasure on it. This mark would lead you to the cemetery with a crypt and puzzle on it. There, a player can find a dead body and a tomahawk, a rather powerful weapon. On the streets of the town, players could find mysterious barrels with some bases on them. Players had to find metal constructions near those barrels and stick them into the base and rotate it several times in order to make the shadow match the sign on the wall. If everything's been done right, the base would turn into a coin. Those coins had to be brought into a certain house and placed them onto a map. In that case, a small demon statue would appear, another melee attack weapon. And last two, probably the most interesting quests. One was connected with a phonograph, which could be found in an old house. When our hero rotated the handle of that phonograph, we could see the corpse of a woman. And it didn't seem something special, but if you rotated the handle in the other direction, players could see the time going backwards and the murder of that woman by her husband. After that, all pictures in the house started bleeding, and we could see the ghost of a man flying out of his portrait. All we had to do is to fire up the image of the killer. And the last quest that took place in the local cinema. At first, players had to find and insert a bulb into a cine projector, then find 3 tapes with movies and become a part of those movies. There, players could find some numbers, and the combination of those numbers gave us a chance to enter assembly room, where Murphy had to stick all movies together and again enter the movie. The locations of those movies were connected, and in the end, Murphy could find a golden gun. Nothing extraordinary, but still cool. There are all 13 side quests, but I told you about the 14th quest that could be completed only during the second walkthrough, because it completely changes the ending. All you had to do was to take a shovel and dig out 7 specific objects at 7 specific places. Those objects were Hyper Blaster, Robbie the Rabbit, Aglaophotis, Metatron Seal, and all that stuff. If a player found all those things, then despite all that karma thing, Murphy would get a unique finale.
Such a shame. Here be monsters again. Here be monsters again. Surprise!
All that is a surprise party for Murphy, and the heroes of the previous parts have come to this party. Nurses, James, Laura, and even Mary with Heather. And of course, Pyramid Head. And a classic one, by the way, from the second part, not from Homecoming and movies. Now it's up to the cake.
Such a shame. Here be monsters again.
Besides, Downpour was full of Easter eggs. For example, while wandering around the city, we could see the truck that has strong resemblance to the one Travis Grady used to drive. And by pulling one of the ladders, we could enter the room 302 from the 4th part. It's not completely open though, but it's always cool to come back to a familiar location. By the way, the number of a prison cell where Murphy was kept was also 302. And there are a lot of other references, like the names of the streets, which are named after different writers, or the name of a prison. It's a reference to The Shining, a novel by Stephen King. The novel takes place at the Overlook Hotel. There are too many of them to name them all, so I think I'll just leave it to your personal investigation. Also, the greatest reference to the previous parts is the music that Bobby Riggs used to play.
It's always a perfect day with DJ Riggs, your on-air friend to the end.
It was straightforwardly taken from the previous parts. Well, as I've touched the music, I think we should talk about the original compositions of Downpour. We already know that Akira Yamaoka left Konami and had nothing to do with the soundtrack for Downpour. Daniel Licht was invited to take his place, who used to write music only for movies and TV shows. He also wrote music to Dishonored, but at that time he was famous for making a soundtrack for Dexter. But it doesn't actually matter, because this guy, in my personal opinion, managed to hold the quality. He tried to bring his own motives into the music, but still paying respect to Akira. The game wasn't released besides PS3 and Xbox 360, and still remains as a console exclusive. Its sales barely reached 500,000 copies, which is almost as bad as Homecoming in terms of sales. Still, Vatra made a pretty good work, but after some time, Vatra Games declared themselves bankrupt and closed, and the story of this series simply ended. This is the last complete story about the town of Silent Hill. The fans are still waiting for a small bit of information about a new part of Silent Hill, waiting for some kind of rebirth, but unfortunately, as we all know, it's not destined to happen in near future. Still, I would like to point out that there are a lot of things like comic books, movies, small games, and all that stuff remains. And of course, I haven't forgotten about PT. And I think I'll enlighten all that in the following video. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. See you soon, ladies and gents, in several weeks.